Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new video, and today we are back on F1 2021 My Team Career Mode, and this time around we have round 11 of the championship season in Singapore. But if you missed out the last episode, you should be sure to go and watch it. We had the Russian Grand Prix where we had a bit of a hard time with the rain. That's all I can say for that one. But here we are for Singapore, and already we had something fail. We had an upgrade fail, and now we move into the race weekend. And it will rain, and more importantly, there will be new regulation changes for Season 2. So that is a bit of a shock. I didn't think we'd get any regulation changes in this career mode. But, well, here we are. Now it's going to rain again. And if you remember to Russia, it was about 70% of rain. So I'm going to decide to not trust that. But now we're going to take many grid penalties, as I believe our pace can be quite good in Singapore. And depending on the rain, it may not matter where I start. We go through quick practice, but now let's move into qualifying. We now move to my first and only qualifying lap of the entire session. I only did this lap to try and get a feel for the car and see where I can really push the limit. And if you ignore the final corner that I'm about to commit here, this has been a pretty clean lap, except for the final corner. Don't blame me. I had a lot of understeer. I blame the car more than anything. But somehow, this lap was actually enough to get me through to Q2, so I didn't even have to really try too hard. It wasn't my best lap of all time, for sure, but I'm going to obviously skip through Q2, since there's not really much point in me risking having a chance of getting to Q3 under soft tyre. So we will be starting from the back of the grid, but that is quite good pace shown already. Hopefully we can translate that in the race.
It's time to see how our drivers are stacking up after yesterday's exciting qualifying session. Valtteri Bottas lines up on pole position, and it's Lewis Hamilton alongside. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Leclerc, Ricciardo, Max Verstappen and Norris, Perez, Sainz, Gasly and Fernando Alonso, Tsunoda, Vettel, Lance Stroll and Giovinazzi, the owner driver, Raikkonen, Mick Schumacher and Robert Schwartzman, Russell, Latifi, Mazepin and Esteban Ocon rounds off the grid. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today?
Well, that is very odd indeed. Why am I P15? I saw that Ocon took a grid penalty, so kind of cool to be moved up a place. But I literally have a brand new engine. I even checked during the Grand Prix. We have a brand new engine. We took as many grid penalties that you can possibly take, yet the game has kind of forgot to give me the penalties, and now I'm P15. Well, I mean, it does help me out. It does help me. But to think that I could have got maybe P11 and had no consequence, that would have been really funny to think about. But we're now lining up onto the grid where we should not really be starting, but here we are. Let's see if we can have a good race as we're revving up to 5 red lights here for the Singapore Grand Prix. The lights are out and we are underway here for the Singapore Grand Prix, and it is a pretty good getaway from me. I've already jumped the Alfa Romeo of Giovinazzi. Meanwhile, the two Aston Martins in front of me are going wheel to wheel. I look to try and have a go. I got tapped on the side by the Alfa Romeo, and that causes me to kind of panic, and I go around the outside of the two Aston Martins and nearly go into the side of Sebastian Vettel. I nearly hit him again, but we're up into P13. The two Mercedes are in the lead ahead of Charles Leclerc and the Red Bull and the McLaren. Meanwhile, I'm in P13 under pressure from the other Aston Martin car of Stroll, who will look to go around my outside, but I'm not going to get mugged off by Stroll. No, thank you. That ain't going to happen. In fact, we're going to overtake Vettel down the inside at the hairpin, and now we're up into P12. That is a good start, but I might have underbody damage, which could affect the amount of grip I have, and that is clearly seen as I nearly lost the rear of the car, and I'm losing it everywhere. I cannot even brake, so I'm going to turn the brake bias up. Maybe that will help with the slight underbody damage that I have, And talking of Antonio Giovinazzi, he's going into the pit lane, and so is George Russell. A terrible start to their Grand Prix, and that is most likely race over for them. Meanwhile, we move on to lap 3, and I'm trying to stay in the DRS of Yuki Tsunoda, and I'm doing a decent job, but that turn 3 really isn't going to help my chances. But if I'm able to keep up with them, I could be in a really good position. Meanwhile, I'm not under pressure from behind. Vettel is keeping Stroll behind. Really, he should play the team game, and that is helping Schwartzman stay with them. But now we move on to lap 5, going towards lap 6, and I'm right behind the AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda. The soft tyres are really starting to drop off here, and I'm not able to make a way through due to being in a little DRS train with Fernando at the forefront of it. How can I be able to overtake Tsunoda? Hopefully, I can make a move soon enough, as I'm really close to the back of the both of them. And we move on quickly to the third sector. I got a much better run than Tsunoda, but I get the braking all wrong, and I nearly go into the back of Fernando, and somehow Tsunoda and I did not make contact. It definitely isn't my finest move, but we move up into P11. That was one hell of a scary moment. I was so sure we would have gone into the back of the Alpine, but somehow we did not. We managed to get the car slowed down enough. Fernando and a few other cars have gone into the pit lane, so we're up into P5, and now moving on to the beginning of lap 8. We have now taken the lead of the Grand Prix due to doing the overcut. Every other race leader has gone into the pit lane, so now we're just going to try and control the gap between me and Vettel, while the main guys, Hamilton, Bottas, will go through the field soon enough. So I definitely will anticipate having to let them through later on. But for now, I need to control my pace and make sure that Vettel on the hard tyre does not actually catch up with me. Meanwhile, Schwartzman is actually getting attacked by Lewis Hamilton here on the straight. Hamilton will make a very simple move, fresher tyres and a much better car. He will move up into P5. A lovely move there from the 7-time champion, P4 should I say. But we now move on, and I'm starting to struggle with the tyres. But big news now, the rain will show up in about 15 minutes according to Jeff, but I don't know whether I should trust it, because after what happened in Russia, I'm definitely not gonna throw absolutely everything at one stint. I could actually try and achieve a podium, but I don't know if the rain will be even strong enough to be on the intermediates. As we saw in Russia, it cost me absolutely dearly, and we did lose a clear points finish. Meanwhile, behind me, Vettel is getting overtaken by Hamilton here. Down the inside goes the Mercedes on the Aston Martin. Bottas will do the same thing to Stroll, and he will get up another position. Hamilton is now in P2 right behind me as we move on to the end of lap 12. And I'm definitely not going to fight him too hard here, mainly because I have my own race to run, and Hamilton will actually have a go down the inside at the final corner already, catching me out. I have to go wide for him, and he'll have the drag reduction system enabled, so he will pull away on the straight. But for that, let me be a bit aggressive here. Round the outside of Lewis Hamilton, through turns 1 and 2. Can I actually stay ahead of the Mercedes? Not really. I don't have the traction, and I could maybe try and keep my nose in there going into turn 4, but no. I decide to brake early and let Hamilton through. He takes the lead of the Grand Prix. Inevitably, that was going to happen. It was always going to happen. Hamilton leads the Singapore Grand Prix, and I have gone down into P2, but it's not all bad considering I'm going to pit in on this lap anyway. Meanwhile, Bottas, the other Mercedes car, is right behind me, and I'm not going to make it too difficult for him. Hopefully, he can try and hunt down Lewis Hamilton and give him a bit of a fight. Hopefully, we'll see some action at the front of the field. But anyway, end of the lap, and I'm going into the pit lane for the hard tyres. And of course, I did consider pitting for the medium tyres and trying to risk going until the rain. But at the same time, after what happened in Russia, we just cannot do that. We cannot risk losing more points that we really should have. So into the pit lane for the hard tyres to the end of the Grand Prix. They will make it there easily. But of course, it would have been nicer to try and push, but maybe the hard tyres won't handle so bad. Great pit stop from the team, and there is Stroll on the main straight, so maybe we can be ahead of him here. Going into turn 1, will we be ahead of the Aston Martin? Not exactly. We're just behind him and in DRS, but he's on the medium tyres. Didn't he start on the medium tyres? Why would he pit for mediums? I have no idea. Meanwhile, Schwartzman is in also for the medium tyres. So some people are willing to take the risk here with the rain, knowing it will rain later, but I don't think it will rain enough. You'll never know. But we now move back to my perspective, and I'm actually kind of struggling to keep up with Stroll here, and I'm still in P14. It doesn't look like the others will pit anytime soon, and at this stage I'm actually somewhat starting to kind of give up on the hope of points. But then I see Gasly and Alonso have gone into the pit lane right before the rain would show up, so maybe if everyone behind Vettel will pit in, then we could be in for a very good race. 5 minutes until rain. Will the others actually stay out long enough? No, they will not. They will pit in. Amazing news. That is exactly what we needed. Vettel on the hard tyres held up absolutely everyone on that medium stint. Leclerc, the 2 McLarens, and even a Red Bull or so. But now, that ends up with the question of where we'll end up. Here we go through the final sector. We need to keep it clean, as now we know we are genuinely fighting for a few points in this Grand Prix. Maybe even big points here. Round the final corner. And how far ahead or behind will we be from Vettel? We go through on the main straight. We're in P7 right now, and the others are still halfway through the pit lane. So we're a mile ahead of them. The strategy has gone perfectly here. The gap between me and Vettel is 8 seconds, and I can't believe it. We can actually get a top 5, maybe even a podium here today. We nearly went into the wall. I definitely need to calm down now. We do not want to throw this away like that. Definitely not like that. End of lap 20. And the other drivers, Checo and Carlito, are in the pit lane. So that puts us up into P4. P4 on merit. Genuinely, we are P4 here today. And if we can catch Stroll, we could maybe end up on the podium. 10 laps to go and a 3.4 second gap. But now, a big game changer will show up. Did you see that little glitch? That there is the rain showing up. We are now going to be under pressure because we are on the hard tyres. Vettel is pushing like a madman behind me. And now, being on the hard tyres in the rain is the worst case scenario, considering these are the worst tyres for the crossover point, so I need to hope that it rains quickly. But as I say that, I've been given a new strategy for the intermediate tyres. This could not be any better. We are now going to pit in from P4. We need our team to deliver a perfect pit stop now. We don't want to be behind Ocon. I was actually getting very nervous with him behind. Meanwhile, some people have actually stayed out. Vettel and Lando Norris have stayed out on track on the medium tyres. They're going to be so slow. They're like no longer my problem anymore. We see Stroll going through in the pit lane in front of us. But now we move on to the intermediate tyres. Can the team be quick? 2.5. That will be absolutely perfect. We'll be ahead of Ocon and everyone behind. So now we know Norris and Vettel stayed out. Meanwhile, Yuki Tsunoda also stayed out on the medium tyres, and we're now catching up to him. It's now our job to make sure we get past him quickly and quietly without Ocon catching up. We don't want to collide with Tsunoda here. He will be extremely slow, so it should not be a difficult move, but at this part of the track, it will be tricky. But Tsunoda went wide, but I somehow managed to find a gap around the outside of the AlphaTauri, and we move up into P6. It will be P4 maybe. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas also did stay out, but Tsunoda is now doing me a favour as he's holding up Ocon. Ocon lost about a second behind Tsunoda. Same with Charles Leclerc and Daniel Ricciardo just behind them. But for Tsunoda, a disaster. I don't know what AlphaTauri were thinking, but there's no way he will be able to get into the top 10 now. Meanwhile, we'll be ahead of Vettel and Norris, so we're going to be P4. And depending on our pace in the rain, maybe we could get a podium. Maybe if we see an engine failure, or if we're lucky like that. But for now, I just need to sink it in. We're in P4, everybody. P4 right now. We're in the top 10. That there is already a victory. But we're in the top 5. And maybe have a chance of a podium. And if you look to that gap, we're catching up to Stroll. We caught a second on the Aston Martin on that lap alone. But unfortunately, this is kind of not ideal. The rain is starting to go away and we move on to lap 27. Look how much the track is drying already. It was a very brief stint of rain, and if it did rain for the rest of the Grand Prix, we could have actually finished in P3. Meanwhile, someone who will not be finishing the Grand Prix is Kimi Räikkönen. and Checo nearly went into the back of him. But we move on again to lap 27, now going towards the lap 28, and we're so close behind the Aston Martin of Stroll. Can we actually get close enough to make a move? We've been all over the back of him for about a lap and a half, and I really want to try and get past him here. But we just don't have the straight line speed. I ran pretty much 11.11 on the wings here to try and get the maximum downforce, and it worked out perfectly. My pace has been pretty good in this Grand Prix, I would go as far to say. But now, the track is beginning to dry up, meaning my tyres are starting to overheat, and the dream of a podium is slowly drifting away because the tyres, I cannot really brake or turn as efficiently as I could when the track was a bit wetter. So now, I'm really having to struggle with overheating, and we're now losing time to Stroll here. We begin lap 30 and DRS is now enabled, but we're not going to need it. We're really struggling with that right front. I can hardly turn or brake because the tyre temperatures are just too high. So I might have to now settle for P4, but still nonetheless a really good drive from me. But now Stroll is definitely gone. 2 seconds now is the gap, and we did have hope for a podium, but the rain just decided to go away. I'm not sure why, but here we are. We're about to begin the final lap of the Grand Prix, and look at that, 94 degrees on the front right. And remember, we're not on dry tyres, we're under intermediates, so you can just imagine how much I'm struggling. Meanwhile, we move on to our race winner. Lewis Hamilton will continue Mercedes' dominance this season and win the Singapore Grand Prix. And most importantly, it was never in doubt. The championship leader, Valtteri Bottas, stood no chance to win that Grand Prix. But meanwhile for me, we may not be getting a podium, but look at the front right, 95. I think it will get a puncture at this rate due to being on a dry track on the inters. But what a shock for me here. Round the final 2 corners to finish in P4. What a result!
Okay, pick up rubber and bring it home.
That's it for another Grand Prix and a fantastic win for Mercedes. Ant, talk to me. What do you think it was that sealed the win for them?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection, a shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
After an excellent performance at the Grand Prix, I'm sure there'll be plenty of celebrations tonight amongst the Mercedes team, and they certainly deserve it.
Well, there you have it, P4 out of 22. What a result for me and the team. Meanwhile, Stroll on the podium, imagine if we were there. But that, guys, will end today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.
For Valtteri Bottas, further solidifying his lead at the top of the table. So, Anthony Davidson, who would you rank as your driver of the day?
Let's give it to Esteban Ocon. That was a commanding performance today. Very impressive indeed.
It's time to check out the constructors' standings. Mercedes continue to extend their lead. Meanwhile, good work from Aston Martin this weekend, who pushed themselves further up the order. It's been an absolutely wild weekend of Formula One action. I can't wait to see what's next.